Welcome, everyone. We're so excited to have you here as we start a new school year. I'm sure that a lot of you have started back to school, if not this week before, or you start very soon after the holiday. So we're glad that you took the time to join us today. I am excited because I think it's the perfect way to kick off a new school year talking about awareness and mindfulness in the library. So we're really glad that you joined us today. It's nice too, because you'll be able to, if you have questions or comments or things that you want to share, you can also put it in the chat today. And so we have that open too. But to start, I just want to extend a really special thanks to Follett for their continuous support of the Future Ready Librarian Strand and everything that we do and all the things that we get ready to, especially at the beginning of the school year. We're so grateful for all the support that Follett gives us, and especially with our Future Ready librarians. And so a big thanks to them. My name is Shannon McClintock Miller. I am the District Teacher, Librarian, and Innovation Director at Van Meter Community School in Van Meter, Iowa. I also serve as the Future Ready Librarian spokesperson, and I work with Follett on a lot of other great projects too. You can find my work at the Library Voice, that is my blog, and find me on social at Shannon M. Miller. And I also put my email at the bottom, and I'm always happy to help anyone with whatever you need. And so feel free to reach out there too. But before I introduce our very special guest, I just wanted to put a reminder in to remember everything that we do within the framework as Future Ready librarians and all of these gears coming together. When we think about mindfulness and social emotional learning and going into a new school year, I think it's also good to reflect on everything we do and how these topics fall into the things that we work on. If it's our learners, if it is the community partnerships we have, if it's collaborating with teachers, we always have to think about these things too for us as librarians, and also just our social emotional learning and health too. So I wanted to just put in a reminder to remember that when we're thinking about our own practice as well. So today I'm super excited to invite three of my dear friends and amazing librarians to the show. And we're going to start with my friend, Ashley.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Ashley Cooksey. I am a white cisgendered heterosexual female, and I currently reside in Conway, Arkansas, which Native American lands of the Great and Little Osage Indian tribes. I am the director of our Technology Learning Center within the College of Education at the University of Central Arkansas, and you can address me using female pronouns she or her. And I'm going to toss it next to our next presenter.
I need to unmute myself. Hi, I am Traci Chun, and I also use the pronouns she, her, and hers, and I am the teacher librarian at Skyview High School in Vancouver, Washington. You can find me on social media at Traci Chun, and I am from the beautiful land of the Cowlitz, right here right across the river from Portland, Oregon, and we like to say that we are the original Vancouver. So now I'll pass it on over to my friend, Lynn.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Lynn Kleinmeyer, and I am a white cisgendered heterosexual female as well. And my pronouns are she, her, hers. I am a former teacher librarian who is now working as a digital learning consultant for Grantwood AEA, or Area Education Agency. So I work with lots of different districts around the Cedar Rapids, Iowa area, which is on the traditional lands of the Iowa tribe. I'm so excited because as part of my work, I get to serve a variety of our districts and help them intentionally integrate technology into their learning landscapes and continue to have my feet kind of in that library space as well, having the great joy to continue to work with and support a large number of librarians in the Cedar Rapids, Iowa City Metro. So some of you, as you were listening, maybe wondering, why did we start off with all of these identifiers and the land acknowledgements? And As part of this practice of awareness and mindfulness, it really does start with self. And the identities that we bring to spaces affect how we navigate those spaces, even in a digital space. And so our whole hope today is talking about this idea of building awareness and mindfulness and helping us build our capacity. So I know there's sometimes a little bit of a need to clarify between awareness and mindfulness. So Ashley, do you mind explaining that to us?
Sure. Thank you so much. The most basic terms to differentiate between awareness and mindfulness would be that awareness is the knowledge or perception of a situation or facts, and mindfulness takes practice. It's an internal process that allows us to acknowledge our thoughts, our perceptions in the present moment. So with mindfulness, the past doesn't really matter. It doesn't affect you right now. The future doesn't affect you in this moment. Awareness and mindfulness are linked, though.
Whoops. I think we lost Miss Ashley.
Well, let's see if she comes back online. But to just kind of keep sharing what Ashley was talking about is that they definitely are related. And a lot of times, in order to be truly mindful, it's partnered with awareness, right? It's the awareness of the things that are happening around you that can then give you the time and space to reflect. And then the awareness also helps, put those thoughts and those reflections into your practice. So our first set of slides is talking about awareness, mindfulness, and self-care in collections. And it's about creating spaces and curating resources that support students. And I am going to be the first to admit, I oftentimes get awareness and mindfulness mixed up. And so as I'm talking, if I share those interchangeably, this is a learning experience for all of us. And I'm really excited to be here learning with you. So bear with me if I get the two a little bit mixed up sometimes. But the first thing I want to talk about is, if it's going to let me slide. There we go, is libraries as safe spaces. So right now, as we all know, at different parts of our country are experiencing different levels of support for libraries. But I think at the end of the day, really being reflective of our space and recognizing that we are a safe space. So whether you're in a school library or you're a public library, an academic library, we need to really view ourselves as a safe space. And that means that we're safe for everyone. And sometimes this takes an awareness and also a little bit of mindfulness so that we are aware that we're serving everyone, even if they have different beliefs and different thoughts, different backgrounds, different experiences than we are having and experiencing. And it really does take some mindfulness to make sure that your space is set up to be a safe space for all of your stakeholders, regardless of your personal beliefs. It's kind of like we have to check them at the door, right? So a student may come in with something that I don't identify with, or I don't experience, or I don't necessarily agree with, but it's really important that I run my space as a safe space so that it's a productive, healthy environment for all of my learners. So one way you can do this is providing support in your collection and thinking about your collection in terms of as a community space and not just your own personal collection. And this is really hard for me because as a librarian, I tend to buy books that I like to read. So for example, if I'm looking at my library right now and I look out, I don't have a ton of horror or thriller books because those aren't ones that I personally identify with. And so I'm bringing in my own level of bias, right? Because I tend to want to buy books that I am excited about reading, that I think kids will be excited to read. And so I think one thing to really be aware of is making sure that your collection is meeting the needs of all of your students, not just the students that you maybe identify with. One thing that we've also done here at my school that I totally stole this idea from another librarian, our public library is the one that actually implemented this in our area, was providing a safe space collection. And we call it the self-discovery collection here. And it's a set of books that are maybe like self-help books or books about issues or topics that may be a little bit controversial or maybe a little sensitive. And the idea behind this is that these books are available for students to just borrow on the honor system. So I have them in my catalog, but they're barcoded, but they don't require a checkout. And the reason behind this is a student may want to check out a book on, let's say, for example, an eating disorder, and maybe they don't want it on their official account. Maybe they're worried a teacher or a parent, or maybe even, a library staff member is going to see that they're borrowing this book and have some kind of judgment. Maybe they're embarrassed, maybe they're nervous, maybe they're checking it out for a friend. And so the idea behind this is they check it out on the honor system, and it's nowhere in my Destiny record that this student borrowed this book. And it was interesting when I first implemented this collection a few years ago. I was worried that a lot of the books were going to go missing and never return because it was on the honor system. But surprisingly, the books circulate and they do come back. I have only lost a couple, and I'm going to chalk that up to that student really, really needed that book for that reason. And I'm not going to lose too much sleep over losing that material. So that's kind of the self-discovery collection. And like I said, the thought process to provide students resources that they can access without having any kind of tie to it or record of it. So the things that I try to ask myself to really be mindful of my space and my collection is asking myself kind of these big ticket questions. And I also really like to ask these questions to my peers and my colleagues so that they can help hold me accountable. So for example, what does your collection say about your mission and the vision of your space? Does it meet the needs of your students in your community? Our communities and our students are changing rapidly. Our students and us, we've all gone through this pandemic together, and we definitely have different needs than we did even a couple of years ago. I know here in my building, we've been talking a lot about social emotional learning, and a lot of our students need to really be retaught all of those skills that they learned maybe in school that they missed out on a couple of years. So really asking yourself those questions about the mission and the vision of your space. Is your space opening doors for students, or is it closing them? Is it making all students feel welcomed, or only a portion? It's really easy to make your space welcoming for students who are successful at school, those AP students or those high achieving students. But are we making sure that our space is accessible and friendly and has resources for all of our students? And then really asking our students, what do you want to see in this space? This is your space. I'm just kind of the keeper. And again, these are questions that hold me accountable. So I say to myself, am I doing exit tickets when I have groups come in? Am I surveying my staff and my students? Am I asking kids and am I listening to hear what they say? Or am I trying to make it my own? And so it's really important, I think, for me to ask these questions for self-reflection, but also, like I said, to hold myself accountable. It's really easy to get complacent and easy and like what we're doing and forget that things are changing. And then again, just is it mindful and aware of your community, and how can you improve it? So another concept is really providing support in your space. So depending on your school, your level, your students, some might not be appropriate. It might not be appropriate. Here's a picture of part of my library where I have a couch and I have a little lamp and I have a Keurig. That might not be appropriate in your space. But you can definitely ask your students and your staff about what you can do to provide support in your space, where again, students feel like they have ownership. We all know when students feel like they belong, when they feel valued, they tend to be higher achieving. They tend to want to come to school. They want to connect with those adults. They want to connect with those spaces. And if you can be that connection for those students, I think it's a really, really great, and it's a special opportunity to help these students be the best that they possibly can be. So thinking about your space, are you providing lots of different support? I know in my space, I have tables and chairs for students who need to study. I have kind of a quiet reading area for students who need to read. I have a lounge area. But depending on your space and your students, finding some connections to your space that will help support awareness and mindfulness. And then finally, thinking about creative collections. So what are some non-traditional library items that you can add to your collection to support mindfulness and self-care? So I know a lot of us do, community coloring pages where we set out, or maybe you set out bookmarks for students to color and take with them. I know in my building, in my library, we have a community puzzle. I have a big tall table, and Staff will come in and put a couple of pieces in during their lunch break just to get a little of a brain break. But we really have started to thinking about how can we take that the next level. So we've started checking out puzzles and checking out Legos and checking out journals, and also recognizing that some of those things may not come back in the best shape, but trying to find community partners, PTAs, parent groups, how other places can support you in finding some non-traditional libraries to support mindfulness and self-care. And like I said, kind of think outside the box, ask your students, board games, just different things that maybe can encourage students to find healthy activities that they can do, and find ways to connect them to you and your collection and your school. So I'm going to turn it on over to awareness, mindfulness, and self-care in practice.
Thank you. And I actually just put something in the chat too, thinking about students in my former library and as elementary, when they would check out an origami book, I provided origami paper because that was something that was worked into our practice to provide if students are checking out origami books. Have you ever tried to cut a piece of paper in that perfect square to fold and make origami? It was ridiculous. So I'm going to share a couple of strategies that I have used previously and that I currently use to practice awareness, mindfulness, and self-care with students. Currently, I do work with adults who are in a master's level program, but I have been in K-12 in a library and as a technology leader as well. So one great resource is Mindful Schools, and they actually provide research about why mindfulness is important. It is linked to improved attention, emotional regulation, can increase capacity, and reduce stress and anxiety. And who does not need some of that stress reduction within our field of education? So when I would work with students for awareness and mindfulness of their own body, one of the things that I began to do was to explain the why. Why are we doing this? Students like to know that. They want to know why they're doing something. One of the things that I always did, even with kindergartners, was to share about your posture and how it affects your brain. Most of the time, our kids sit for hours during the day, and our bodies are not made to do that. So explaining why it's important to sit up straight. I'll use the illustration of a water hose. If you put your hand on your back and feel your spine bending and flexing and moving, your spine has all of your nerve system that runs through it, your blood vessels. So if that is bent, it's like kinking a water hose that's not going to flow as well. It's not going to provide oxygen and fresh blood to your brain. And students were always fascinated by this. We used picture books to illustrate some of that. So using what you can, and even with older students, they love to have picture books explaining science behind something. Universal design for learning is very important, especially in my role now as an online teacher, because I want to make sure all of my lessons and activities that I supply to students are accessible. One thing that I actually did this summer was transfer all of my videos to make sure they were in a program that we use called Kaltura, because it transcribes everything. So not only is there closed captioning, but it gives a physical transcription that students can print if they need that. They have the video they can see, or they can simply listen by using the transcription. It will go word by word. Social emotional learning and wellness is super important as well. And some of the reason that we have as adults difficulty in teaching this and explaining it to students is because we were not taught that as children. So finding that support for yourself and reaching out to your school librarian, school counselor for partnership is one really great way that you can bring that into your space. If you're stuck on that and you're not sure, there are some pre-built lessons and curriculum out there that you can find. However, I do suggest starting with the CASEL, C-A-S-E-L frameworks, because they are a social emotional learning standard. So they provide some really great information and the why behind teaching social emotional learning and wellness. And I know Lynn and Traci are pretty active over here in the chat. And I know Lynn's love language is UDL. She is fantastic with explaining some of those concepts. One of the things I mentioned was using picture books. And one of the books that we used to talk about mindfulness and posture and body awareness was Sequoia by Tony Johnson. It's a fabulous book about a sequoia tree who goes, of course, through a growth transformation and through a forest fire. Beautiful, beautiful illustrations. And as we read through this book, we talked about how a tree, roots down and grounds itself and can stand tall and proud. And then students, we actually practiced tree pose because I'm a certified yoga teacher. And this was great for balance. Balance is one of the things that we actually lose first as we age. So anytime I can practice and work with students in this, I try to. So we actually did this and practiced tree pose. And you might think, that's fun and cute. But I noticed a few weeks later, as I was walking through the cafeteria, there was a kindergartner standing there in line waiting for lunch in tree pose. And I, asked him, I'm like, hey, buddy, what you doing? He said, tree pose, very proudly because he knew what it was called. Why are you doing tree pose, hun? He said, oh, because this line is taking forever and I need to practice grounding myself so I have patience. So it was just a great way to connect to some of that mind-body practice. He knew that he was getting frustrated, but he had a tool at his disposal that he could use to channel some of that and to find even breath work or just this simple balancing pose that didn't take up space. It wasn't something that disrupted others around him, that he could use to regulate his emotions as well. We also have a Padlet where you can find some of these titles of the picture books that I have used, and you are welcome to actually add to the Padlet. So if you have any additions for picture book titles that you could use to demonstrate awareness or mindfulness, please pop those into our Padlet. It is living, so Lynn, Traci, and I have used it for about a year or so. So we do continuously add to, change, and edit that as well. And thinking about ways that I can use mindfulness just in lesson teaching and planning, providing student voice and choice, using things like hyperdocs, which have a specific method and design to the lesson. They have engage, explore, explain, apply, share, reflect, and extend. And it's a great way to incorporate that technology into it. Lynn or Traci can, there we go. Leah's got it. Thanks for putting that link in the chat. Explore boards are awesome as well. That gives students an option on how they want to take in and engage with content. And choice boards give students agency in how to choose what they present or how they present, demonstrate their learning. So it doesn't have to be a choice or contain new information on a choice board. They just share. They actually get a choice in how they show their learning. Interest and passions is also it's something that I was very interested in because I remember in junior high, elementary, high school, you're always asked what you want to do. And I think that puts a lot of pressure on students, especially moving into high school. We expect ninth graders to know what they want to do for the rest of their life and choose a class path. And sometimes that's really, really very difficult. The website Find Your Grind is really great in matching passions with career options and not what you're good at. I remember taking those aptitude tests and it told me what I should do based on how I scored, but not what I was passionate about. And thinking about awareness. So again, awareness is situational outside of you. Emotions and feelings are not inherent. Students don't know the names a lot of times, especially with younger students, for how they feel or the emotion that they're experiencing. They may say something like, my stomach hurts or my tummy hurts. And we need to get to the bottom or the root of why. Did you have an argument with a friend at recess? Did you get enough sleep last night? Have you had breakfast this morning? Asking those very basic bottom level Maslow questions, right? That foundational need to figure out what they're actually feeling and what emotion is tied to that, to give them the vocabulary for it. I forgot that I could click my own slide for next. This is also linked on our Padlet, but I did provide students with stress management techniques. So they have a voice and a word vocabulary for how they're feeling, but how do they manage that? I just had them spend about 5 to 10 minutes exploring each of these things. So they did a breathing exercise. This is sand. I'm a 90s child, so I remember making the little bottles of sand art where you poured the sand into it. So that's what it is, but it's a digital version. And it has the sound of sand falling, so it connects to ASMR, so they get that sound therapy as well as art therapy. Basic yoga on YouTube. I love Yoga with Adriene. Just preview the videos before you share it with any students. Silk is an interactive art generator. I remember sharing this with Lynn, and she's like, I can't. This is just, it's so interactive and super gorgeous. But it also connects to math because you can teach symmetry with it. Music Squares no longer works because they did not update their Flash player, but there are similar options out there. It just basically is a music mix. So you can create a playlist using lo-fi videos on YouTube. And one of the things that students love the most that actually is a way to relieve stress is blowing bubbles. And we would go outside with little jars of bubbles because in order to make a bubble be successful, you have to slowly breathe in and breathe out. You can't angrily blow a bubble. It's not going to work. So having something like a choice board for students to choose ways to manage their stress or provide other ideas. A lot of students told me that they really enjoyed just being outside or going for a walk, playing football with friends. Finding those things that they do to relieve stress is really helpful for them. And it also gives me a connection to be able to talk to them and provide that one-on-one conversation. So some other things that you could try is creating a playlist of meditation videos or mindfulness yoga videos to share with your students to put that on your website. Providing creative outlets like Traci mentioned, the coloring pages or puzzles in your library. Being aware of transitions and time. One of the transitions that we did after students had sat for a long time, or we did, carpet time with a story, is making sure that they stand and stretch, because again, our bodies are not made to be folded in these little tiny balls all day long. And how much time are they spending looking at a screen? There's a difference in screen time for consumption and screen time for creativity. So making sure that that is built in and they're not just blue light exposed all day long. Modeling and talking about your health awareness and mindfulness journey. I always had I actually have it with me now, a water bottle. And if I left it sitting around, the students knew. It had stickers all over and they're like, Miss Ashley, you left your water bottle. Because that's another thing that our students are missing is access to water during the day. Unfortunately, a lot of our classrooms don't allow water bottles. And so there are very strategic times throughout the day that our students are getting hydration. Going outside. I was fortunate enough to have a garden outside of my library. So if it was a nice day, I live in the South, so if it wasn't too hot, just being outside, taking them out to read their book under the trees. Or we went outside one day because I brought geodes and I let them whack them with hammers on the sidewalk. And they loved it just being outside. It was something they were able to learn and have that vitamin D exposure. One other thing that I like to do is to read the room. There were several days. 3rd and 4th grade is hard. If you've ever taught elementary or been around little elementary babies, 3rd and 4th grade is hard. So there were several days where the students would come into the library and I could read their poor little faces. And I knew we didn't need to do a lesson. I didn't need to give them more information. They needed to sit. They needed to lay down. They needed time to read. And when I would say, grab your book, find a spot, sit and read, their relief just kind of flooded over their face of, I don't have to do something else. Providing that time for them to just kind of relax. I also had space for students in 4th, 5th, and 6th grade to come into the library for recess time. That was allowed by my principal. They would come in if they had homework to do, something to study. A lot of times they just wanted to come in and read, which was totally fine with me. Connecting with leaders to offer after-school sessions for yoga or mindfulness. I guarantee that there is someone in your community that teaches this, and it may not even be yoga or mindfulness. We had someone that taught kickboxing that came in, which was super fun because it was a great way to, again, relieve stress and provide physical movement to your students. So like Lynn says, sharing is caring. So those of you that are with us in the chat, Share some of the strategies or approaches that you have used or that you plan to try from something that we've talked about so far to engage students in the why of awareness, mindfulness, or self-care. I'm going to give just a couple of seconds to pop in if you have something to share in the chat. And I know all of this is super important as well when you're considering students in your space, not just physically and working with print material, but also with technology, and not just our students' lives, but our lives as well. Oh, I love the Go Noodle videos that Allison mentioned. Those are great brain breaks too. All right, and Lynn is going to bring us in with our technology use and how we can be aware and mindful of that, not as just individuals, but also with our students.
Yeah, so the idea of awareness, mindfulness, and now kind of adding in some of that self-care piece with technology. And just pausing for just a moment. I know you're dropping things into the chat. If you feel comfortable kind of answering this question in the chat, I encourage you to do so. If you just want to take this moment as a personal reflection time, please do so as well. I want to be respectful of where you are in your own journey. But just a quick reflection question. What is your relationship with technology? I'm just going to pause for a second. I have to laugh. Traci, thank you for being vulnerable and honest that you're addicted to technology. And I think probably a lot of us can relate because it is this beautiful, like almost love-hate relationship with technology. So I'm going to continue to allow you to reflect, but kind of keeping us moving as we go on. I think what I'm seeing dropping into the chat, that idea of like hard not to fall down a rabbit hole and, like all of those kinds of pieces so resonate. And so when we think about what do we mean about mindfulness and awareness with technology, it's kind of this double-edged sword, right? Technology is part of our just daily landscape, professionally and personally. And as librarians, kind of walking this line between things, because we know that it has powerful potential, and yet there's some pitfalls to it as well. And so this conversation and this sharing of ideas that we're about to have is really about helping us harness that potential for building our own mindfulness and awareness, while simultaneously modeling for others, especially our students, kind of practicing what we preach a little bit, but simultaneously striking that balance and establishing healthy boundaries for ourselves. Just kind of this beautiful spot of trying to find that again, equilibrium between all of these things. So we're going to take this conversation kind of from both sides of things. And we're going to start with that powerful potential to really kind of use technology to build healthy habits. We think about how really beneficial and helpful technology can be in helping us raise our own awareness of our patterns and our habits and changing behaviors. And you think about kind of how we can harness that for our physical health, our mental health, our ability to socially connect with others. There's so much potential for that to encourage those skills of being aware situationally of things and heightening your own personal reflection. So what I'm about to share with you, please know it's not an end-all be-all exhaustive list. It's just a couple ideas and talking a little bit about technology, especially for yourself personally. Obviously right now, this whole idea of the buzzwords of self-care and things like that, technology can be a beneficial partner as well. So please, as we have already mentioned, we encourage you to drop some things into the chat. And then you're also going to find there's some spaces in the Padlet to drop some of these. But when you think about some of the things that are built into technology that help us raise our awareness and start to be reflective and mindful of our own physical health. Just sharing my personal journey. And I don't know if I've shared this even with Ashley or Shannon or Traci before, but probably 8 to 10 years ago, I hit a physical spot in my life where I just needed to make some changes for my own health reasons, and just needed to feel better so that I had energy and I had some capacity to be with my young children at the time. And so technology was my biggest partner in helping me raise that awareness of my own patterns. So using, for example, my Fitness Pal was my go-to, using it to help me build awareness of my relationship with food. So that became a really big indicator. Don't get me wrong, I still eat my feelings, but just building your awareness of kind of what you're doing, those patterns, and then helping me become a little bit more active, because there is a link between physical health and some of the mental health pieces too. So I had a friend who encouraged me to start running. And so a little bit of that ability to track Nike Run happened to be my go-to. Now, obviously, are there tons of other step trackers and things like that out there? Of course there are. Am I advocating that you go out and start training for your next half marathon? Absolutely not. But what I'm saying is just helping us build some awareness, even things that are already built into some of the devices that we're using, those people who have Apple Watches, for example. That how often have you stood? How many steps are you getting? Are you, all of those kinds of awareness. But even just, I think on my Apple, yes, Ashley, you don't run, it's fine. But that awareness of the steps that you're taking and your movement, and then harnessing things like Instagram or YouTube for videos. I know Ashley just mentioned the Yoga with Adrienne, finding quick little workouts. My daughter has found an app called Fit On, and all of these pieces, it's that powerful potential of technology to help us raise awareness and begin to shift some practices when it comes to our own physical health, which then can lead into some of the mindfulness when we start really thinking about our mental health. And Ashley mentioned previously this idea of breathing, and how powerful that is. As a fellow yogi, I found myself in times of stress or kind of times of trauma right now, holding my breath. So harnessing apps to help me remember to do something as simple as breathe. Now, I don't know if any of you happen to utilize any of these, but one of the things that I love about the Breathe app, it's real quick and easy. It just has a breathing exercise as quick as 30 seconds that you can just do on your phone, and it will totally just help you recognize your breathing patterns. The Calm app and the Headspace app are both excellent. There's all sorts of breathing exercises, but there's also meditation. There's some reflective pieces. And what's really great about both Calm and Headspace, they are totally free for educators. So you can also use them in your classroom. So it's that duality of building your own practice, but then also being able to model for your students. So, and I'm seeing kind of up in the chat, people talking about some of the things that they do. Yes, please continue to share. Hiking is absolutely fantastic. But, also thinking about, are there apps or are there things that you use that you really couldn't live without? But another piece of the whole puzzle is that social side of things and harnessing technology. I think during the pandemic, you may have a love-hate relationship with Zoom at this point, but the powerful piece of being able to bring people together in an authentic way. You have all sorts of absolutely fantastic resources out there with social media to be able to connect with others. And one of my absolute favorites is an app called Voxer. And what I love about Voxer is that you can text message people and have group kind of communication and things like that, but you can also do the voice pieces. which just adds that extra element of connectivity. And some people are like, well, Lynn, why would you do that instead of just texting people or just having like a phone call? Well, sometimes it's not that easy to get together and be synchronous. So it provides that asynchronous piece, but also an ability to really connect with others and group things and keep strands of conversations together. So it's just another amazing way to connect. But another thing I realize about myself is when you talk about the self-regulation and in our current space and reality where we are being inundated all the time, sometimes having a little iota of control in your world of wrangling the chaos a little bit, sometimes remembering how technology can help you with those productivity things. So like Google Keep is my absolute favorite. And I have it set up on my phone and I use it both personally and professionally, especially personally. I absolutely love it because in the app on my phone, I can set a location reminder. And so when I actually arrive at Target, which I know is kind of a Midwest thing, but when I arrive at my favorite store, it will pop up and remind me what I'm actually supposed to buy, which is kind of a win situation there. I mean, let's be honest. I also walk out with all of the other things that I don't really need, but it helps me kind of stay organized and capture my ideas and be able to share with others. Same thing with Google Calendar. And so one of the links here, this productivity quiz, and you're going to have access to our slide deck too, just helping you figure out workflows that work for you. All of this is about harnessing that technology for your physical, mental, and personal well-being. So I know I've thrown out a lot of different ideas at you. And again, please know that this is not the end all be all of this whole list of how you can harness technology for that positive mindfulness and awareness building. But we would really encourage you to share some of your favorite tech tools or resources for building your own personal healthy habits. Again, whether it's physical, whether it's the mental, whether it's the productivity, whether it's the social connection piece. We'd love to hear what you're using, what's working, and also the things that you're doing to model for your students. So again, we would encourage you to drop things into the chat and to add them to the Padlet. But I told you, this is like the duality piece, right? So that powerful potential of technology to help you build that healthy habit, but also building healthy habits with your technology so that you are in control of your technology, not the other way around, that the technology is controlling you. So talking about just, again, some reminders, and this is for you both personally and professionally, things for you to be aware of or mindful of in your personal practice, but then also be able to help build this capacity for students, because oftentimes, because our world, technology being such a integral part of our just daily landscape, we sometimes make the assumption that kiddos know how to draw that line. And so definitely want to help model and balance that. So just some things to remind you that maybe you've forgotten about, or just to help you set some of those boundaries, some tips, some tricks, some ideas that might be helpful for you as you're starting a new school year. And, that new school year, new leaf, new you kind of thing, to help you figure out where those boundaries might be. So one of the things that I absolutely love, I have an iPhone, and I'm pretty sure Android does a very similar piece, but those screen time reports of how often you were on your phone and what apps you were using. It's about building awareness so that you can then be mindful of the intentional use. And obviously, I'm a digital learning consultant. And sometimes people look at me like I have three heads when I say that technology is not always the answer. But it isn't. But I also recognize that there's a lot of times where my Voxer use is huge because I'm voxing my colleagues all day long and, chatting back and forth. But then when I look at sometimes, I think one of our friends mentioned the rabbit hole of the endless scroll of Facebook tends to be mine. Facebook and Instagram tend to be where I do the mindless scroll. And there's nothing wrong with that as long as we're not like losing hours. So it's about helping build that awareness again. So those screen time reports can be amazing. Sometimes the health apps within your phone of setting do not disturb pieces or setting time limits on your app use can be super powerful. Setting some boundaries of like no device meals, or hey, from this time to this time, I'm actually going to put my phone. I had a friend who had a phone parking lot at their house, and everybody from 5 to 7 p.m. phones went into this basket, the parking lot, just to help, help them set those parameters for a family. Things like simple things like taking control of your technology and customizing your notifications. There's certain notifications that I allow to pop up on my home screen and certain ones that I have chosen not to. So I have email on my phone, but it's a personal choice that I've made that I do not let email notifications come to my home screen because there's that dopamine hit every time you see that ping. And so I've chosen which ones to actually have push through those notifications and which ones I will make that active choice. Now, if you want to get crazy bananas, doing a challenge for yourself of removing some of the apps from your phone. I have a colleague, an amazing colleague, her name is Beth Swans, and she kind of took it upon herself to remove Facebook and Instagram from her phone. And now she only checks them on the web. So it has to be a little bit more intentional. And that's how she kind of had a breakup with those two apps. And so, I'll be honest, I haven't gotten to that level yet, but just helping you be aware of your practices with your technology and helping yourself set some of those boundaries so that you are mindful and intentional about the use. Now, again, like I said, I'm a digital learning consultant. And so sometimes people will look at me like maybe I'm in the wrong profession when I roll up to a meeting and instead of getting out my laptop, I get out my notebook and paper. Because I know what works for me. Sometimes I know that I need to be present in a space, and I know that writing things help me remember. So especially in an initial meeting, taking the time to kind of know that about myself and use that, but remembering that analog is okay, that it's okay to kick it old school and do some things like Ashley mentioned, taking time in nature. There's a lot of really amazing research about the benefits of being out in nature and the sunshine and breathing that in. Taking time to just sit and be quiet with yourself. Things like reading a book. It's really interesting, the neuroscience going into research of some of the things that have happened around COVID. It pains me to say as a librarian, there was a little bit there where I couldn't quiet my mind to read. So taking that step back and building those practices and giving yourself permission. Now, hopefully, as I'm talking to a group of librarians, that's maybe not a problem for you, but I fell down that rabbit hole for just a little bit. But, really all of this is about helping you to find that balance between your analog and your digital life. And really, again, when we talk about the awareness, starting to realize situations so that you can be mindful and be reflective and have that personal journey. So just kind of helping remind you of those pieces. Now, I've dropped in a lot of the really incredible books or podcasts that I've listened to that kind of set me on my own personal journey for this. And so hopefully these are helpful for you. I would encourage you. I mentioned in the chat before the book, The Art of Noticing. It's lots of real quick challenges for yourself to build your awareness. So just some really, really amazing reads on that one. But again, we absolutely encourage you to continue to share in the chat, but also to add to the Padlet. If you've got any resources or books or anything like that that you've found super helpful as you think about this idea of how to harness the technology? You know, I mean, like pulling a Spider-Man moment here, right? With great power comes great responsibility. So how to harness the potential without falling into the pitfalls. And also knowing that I don't think anybody has it 100% figured out. So being kind to yourself, and giving yourself permission to kind of find that balance on a daily basis. But with that, like I said, continuing to encourage you to add to the Padlet.
So one thing, we talked a little bit about the SEL playbook that is courtesy of my staff always calls it Castle, but I think some people call it Castle. But this playbook is a really great tool if you want to click on the link. It's also in the Padlet, so it's in multiple places for you to kind of check out. And one thing that they suggest doing as an exit ticket with staff or with students is called an optimistic closure activity. And the idea behind it is you leave on a positive note. There has been some research around that students have you take the feeling that you had the last time you were in that space, and the next time you visit that space, that you have those same feelings. So if I leave a math class and I'm feeling really frustrated and upset because I failed a math test, the next time I come into that classroom, those feelings are still going to be within me somewhere. And so the idea behind an optimistic closure activity is you just take a minute with your students and you leave on some kind of positive note. And it can be a self-reflection where you put up some sentence prompts and they just do it internally. It may be an activity where you ask students to share. You may do it on Post-it notes. You may do it on a Padlet. There's lots of different ways to do it. But some of the suggestions that they offer are things like a 1-minute accolade. So something I learned today, or I am curious about, I'm looking forward to tomorrow because, and then there's ones that are more self-reflective, which are something I will do as a result of today's activity, or something I still question, something that still concerns me, something I want to learn more about. And so it's kind of a fun little quick way to end an activity with a note of positivity and optimism, and finding a little bit of peace at the end of your activity or end of your class period. So you can check out, like I said, that's from the playbook, and it is linked here and on the Padlet. So Ashley, you want to close out the show?
Sure. So I love this quote, and Lynn actually added this quote in here, and it's one that I have on my wall here in my office, that mindfulness isn't difficult. We just have to remember to do it. So that's something that we need to work into our self-practice, just to remind ourselves every day. All right. And I think that Shannon is ready to give us kind of a rundown and final comments.
Yeah. And also, if you have any questions, you can also reach them here. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much for sharing and for all of your great tips. And I loved reading the chat too. So I'm anxious just to watch it again. So thank you so much. I just wanted to also share just a few little important key things that we have. And first of all, I wanted to share, I went back to school yesterday. And so I've been doing a lot just to get our teachers and our kids and our library just ready for a new school year. And one of my favorite places to go is the SEL for Educators site that Follett has put together. And you can find all these great printable activities. If it's like a bingo, there's a mindful choice board that's really neat. Little sticky notes that you can make, bookmarks. We made all these today and the kids are already loving them. And you can also find even like idea builders that I love the Pinterest. I love Pinterest. And so Follett has a great Pinterest on a lot of different things, but sharing really good ideas too around social emotional learning. Last year, one thing I did too is they had these posters, which were great. And my teachers, they printed them off and we put them in the classrooms, but I also made an SEL pop-up library in the hallway. And so this is just something down by our elementary classrooms that teachers can come by and they can pick up the books that they might want to use in their classroom. It's a good way for them maybe to they wouldn't see something in the library and they could catch a glimpse of something a topic they want to talk about. So it was kind of fun to put those little posters on the side and make it something really special. And then I also made a choice board to hang on the top with a QR code. And that just linked to books that we had in Capstone and even articles that are in PebbleGo. And so just another way to just always make sure we're supporting our teachers and our kids with resources. Then we have another website that I am so excited about, and it's called the Achievery from AT&T. And this is a great place to go for so many different topics and social emotional learning. I noticed that when I was telling my teachers about it during PD, that there is a category for SEL, and you can find it at this link here where you can just register for free. Everything on here is created in collaboration with Warner Media. So that's really exciting because kids and teachers love using video and things that maybe they've already seen, like characters or shows, other things that you can pull into your classroom. And so you can click on that drop down and you can find it. One thing I wanted to point out too is they also have it's connected to the CASEL or CASEL standards. And so you can search those and even the Common Core. And this is something that they're going to continue to add to, and it's free for everyone. So a really, really great resource with videos and other content that we can pull in, but also really good lesson plans too. So for us as librarians and collaborating with our teachers, I'm so excited about this, and just lots more things to come with this site too. Around Future Ready Librarians, I wanted to point out that we have a pretty new Future Ready Librarian Hub that is amazing, and you can find it at that link. Also, we have our podcast, and we're getting ready to kick off season 5. I actually have 2 recordings right after this, and so I'm really excited about that. But you can find all the seasons at this link. And I wanted to point out that Miss Ashley did one last year, Mindfulness in the Library, which was wonderful. This is what I listen to when I walk sometimes. And so even though I'm the one that's hosting them, it's nice some of them I've listened to more than once, actually. And so you can pick them up wherever you subscribe to podcasts. We also have a self-reflection tool. That's a good thing this time of year to see where you fall, and a conversation piece around Future Ready Librarians. And I have been working with a few districts this year other than my own. And we've been using this when you sit down, especially at the beginning of the year, to talk to your administrators, even your teacher, like maybe their team leaders. This is a great place to start too. We have lots of podcasts and lots of webinars that are all recorded. And our webinars, we have another one coming up in September and then one in November. And then we'll be into a new year, but these are all recorded and you can find them on the site as well. But again, a huge thank you to our guest. I wish we were all in person, but I always love seeing you girls. And a very special thank you to Follett again. And thank you to all of you to take out some time from this busy time of year to join us. And we can't wait until the next one. So thank you so much.